Hi, Elise here. Welcome back to our Sunday morning video blog for Forever is the Soul, Andrew's relatively new novel. I am sitting here in Andrew's very special red chair that he delivers all his Sunday morning blogs from. And this week we're going to be talking about chapter 5, which is Fear Trumps Love Almost Every Time. And the subhead for this week is Fear is at the root of our human experience. It creates the masks that we hide behind. So I hope you enjoy this week. And if you haven't already, please go to our Facebook page for Forever is the Soul, where you can like, share, and follow us. You can also find Andrew on YouTube under his name, Andrew MacWha. So I hope you enjoy this week's episode and have a great Sunday and a week to come.
Happy Sunday morning. Time has a way of going by very quickly. As I sit here and I think about chapter 5 and the title, Fear Trumps Love Almost Every Time, I recognize that it's only been a month that we've been doing these videos, and it's been so quick. It's like I did chapter 4 last week, but to me it seems like yesterday. It's just, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but it's like everything seems to be accelerating. Time is compressing. So it's kind of fun to sit here and go, wow, where did the week go? And here we are already, and we're doing chapter 5, Fear Trumps Love Almost Every Time. To me, writing that, and why I wrote that, fear is such a component to what it is that we are within ourselves. We're biologically hardwired to respond to anything that we don't understand initially through a sense or a feeling that we can call fear. So I don't know if anyone else can relate, but you know, when we interact with other humans, especially when we first meet other humans, there's a self-consciousness, there's a fear that dissipates our ability to just jump out and be who we are. And when I put fear trumps love almost every time, I'm talking specifically about initial contacts, or contacts where we are out of our element. Well, we're in our element, we're in our circle of friends and our families, things of this sort. We're not generally fearful. I grew up with 4 brothers, so there was competitiveness, but that's not really fear. And even if my older brother's scaring me because he's doing something, it is a fear, definitely, that does something to how I'm going to respond. But generally speaking, fear in the dynamics of a comfortable place that you are used to functioning in doesn't necessarily trump love every time. Again, I speak from my own journey, but you know, even when I started to do these videos, I have to admit to myself that fear was a part of what I had to move beyond in order to connect with what I perceive to be the heart, where I'm able to kind of flow with what comes into my head and I'm not analyzing what's coming into my head. I used to feel fearful that if I paused and thought too much, well, I better retake and I have to do another one, rather than just let myself free flow. So even from that construct, I can look at myself and say that for me to step out of my comfort zones and produce videos, my fear was trumping or overriding my capacity just to be still, to enjoy the moment that I'm in, to enjoy what it is that is going to come through that I'll share. Now, the cool thing about video, especially when it's not live, and we'll be working towards live before too long, is that I can always delete it. So if I don't like what I've done, I can just go, you know what, that doesn't feel right. It's not what I wanted to say. So at least let's just delete this, and I'll do it again. But I don't feel if I feel fearful, or if I feel like I'm going to say things incorrectly, or the implication of what I'm saying isn't true to what I feel, I just let it go and I let the energy move me. And in last week's video, I talked about, sharing consciousness with the soul. And I do think that, yes, I'm mortal. We're all mortal. But there's this other part to consciousness. It's like there's another level that we can tune into. So when I do these videos or when I work with people one-on-one or in small groups, I'm teaching myself, or I'm learning to trust what I feel in my heart and let that come through on these videos or on whatever it is that I'm doing. So it gives me a sense of purpose and reason that supersedes my insecurities, my vulnerabilities, people are going to judge me, why aren't people, blah, 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 and on it goes. And I do think that we share commonalities, all of us. I talked about innate wisdom and just what is innate that comes through us. To me, that is innate comes from spirit and converges with the algorithms that we have acquired, we'll say, as we've wandered through our lives thus far. So our brains are always building on augmentations. It's augmenting itself as new information comes. As new information comes, we get new algorithms, and then with those algorithms, what is it that we want to do? Let them just pass through us and not really do anything? Or do we want to go, well, wait a second, that's kind of neat, and start to build new constructs as to what is maybe a different frequency or a different utilization of biochemistry with energy that produces sort of an alternative consciousness that isn't so concerned with fear or resistance. And again, I emphasize fear and resistance is found throughout the animal kingdom. It's tied to the limbic system, and it's very, very powerful. And it creates the distortions or the resistances that impair us from just truly coming out and saying and being and doing what we want. At the back of most people's minds when I used to coach, there was always a little voice going, what would dad think, or what would mom think, or what would this person think, or what would that person think? Whereas, what is it that you feel? It's not even so much thinking. What do you feel? What are you willing to feel? And how are you going to allow that feeling to convert into a thought that now occupies consciousness and begins to direct you? Now, the subcontext in this particular chapter is fear is at the root of our human experience, which I sort of just communicated, that fear is an undercurrent that puts us into places within ourselves where we can be imprisoned by things that are subconscious, that don't even necessarily come onto a conscious level. They're just there. They're resistances. Again, fear is a resistance that impairs our ability to navigate, whether it's a verbal navigation. I'd love to paint, but I'm so judgmental with my painting skills that I stop painting. And it could have been a true innate feeling that perhaps you are a painter, maybe really abstract, maybe you're not a Robert Bateman. But it's that resistance that we have that often disrupts the energy field that is coming through our centers, that are giving us guidance, giving us a sense of direction that we immediately pull back on. We pull back and go, oh, I can't be an artist, or I can't write a book, or I can't. Again, where does that I can't come from? Well, if fear is at the root of our human experience, well, then you have to understand that there's this undercurrent of fear that's constantly attempting to hijack your consciousness. And I truly believe that the only place we have any power is on a conscious level. And if you even extend that into where's power, it's consciousness now, because it's such a variable. It's always changing. If the dog was starting to start to bark, my consciousness would go to that dog. If there was a jet airplane went flying by real quick, my consciousness would be hijacked into that. And that's just the biological processors bringing forth an attempt to interpret what is being channeled through your sensory feeds and running through all kinds of algorithms, thus producing consciousness again. The discipline of consciousness, to be able to be mindful and tuned to what is your consciousness experiencing right now, almost requires, and I've said this before, the pacification, to go more passive, to breathe, to relax as much as possible, regardless of where you are. Just be mindful of breath and your life will change. And understand that through breathing, what you're really doing is you're beginning to eradicate or dissipate some of those neurological networks that have formed that create that impulse that then create the blocks or the resistance that then hijack consciousness and pull it back down into often reiterations. If you think about it, we triggered, we go back into, oh yeah, and we start to narrow away about the same stuff that caused that feeling to happen to us at another time and space. And some of these patterns can go back 20, 30, 40. I'm 60. Some of these patterns go back 30, 40, 50 years in me, where I can feel resistance. Uh-oh, I've got to lecture. Yikes, that's bad. It's not bad. I love to lecture. Now, the other part of the subtext in chapter 5 is it creates the mask we hide behind. I like that, okay? And I can look back at my life and go, oh my God, how many masks have I put on? And I'm sure any one of you can look into yourself and go, yep, I've put on a lot of masks. And I think it comes from, our masking comes from empathy. We're empathetic by nature. So we empathize with other people that are around us. And in doing so, we modulate, we modify our energy field. And this comes again from fear. If you're not 100% certain and filled with a sense of conviction, who am I and what am I doing with my consciousness right now, well, then we're probably going to be pulled into deviations. We're going to modify ourselves to accommodate what we think is coming at us. So when you look at interpersonal relationships, when I was younger, for my father, I would modify my personality. And this is not intentional, meaning I'm not conscious that I'm doing it. My subconscious is triggering all these algorithms to create a mask that I project out and say, here, Dad, I'm here. Mom would be someone else. Brother would be someone else. And then as you grow, friends, business associates, all these different people are oscillating through their energy fields, thus projecting out towards you whatever their agendas may be. They may be just wanting acceptance, love, validation, or they might be angry, or it could be anything. But they're affecting your energy field, because one of the problems with being humans, especially in our cultural conditioning, certainly in North America, is that we've been taught or programmed into seeing ourselves as being really, really small. We're just these little physical things. Whereas Eastern philosophies and other idealisms talk about energy fields, which I happen to believe in, is that we're so much bigger, so we're constantly interacting with each other's energy field. Now, our paradigm of thinking is it's all very physical. You say this, I say that, you say this, I say that. When you start to tune to energy fields, and again, I've emphasized, I don't like the word higher consciousness, but a consciousness that's not so constrained by egocentricity. So you're starting to see yourself as both an ego and a spirit. And I think that that's a valuable tool. If you can start to bring the two together, I am both a physical manifestation as well as an energy system of some sort. We could project on that for hours. But if you can keep it simple and just go, okay, energy is, and let's go to a pretend place. I like to pretend. Let's pretend that your soul, which is in a way your creator, if you could go to a place where you recognize that it created the circumstances of your conception, therefore birth, and it began a process of grooming you as a human being to get to a place in your life where you would begin to feel a push towards destiny. You might want to be a doctor, you might want to be a scientist, you might want to be a lawyer, a politician, or you might find yourself sitting in a red chair talking to people, who knows. But if you start to make an association between ego and recognize that ego is the small part of who you are, very much subjected to your own biochemistry, therefore your own algorithms, your own conditioning, and spirit, well, the implication of it was there before conception would imply that it maybe had a cognitive understanding of what it was doing when it, we'll use the word chose, to manifest you in physical form, which is really it, if you start to pull the two together. And you recognize that it is on a journey that at this particular moment is mortal. It's a mortal journey, but it's also energy. So, and it knows that this mortal aspect of itself, called human, will eventually come back to it, wholeness, again, to the energy fields, in order to do it again and again and again, and so on. It's the principles behind reincarnation. When we get to that place inside yourself, and you start to recognize, or feel would be a better word, feel that the presence of your soul and your ego's acknowledgement of your soul is a huge component, almost necessary, or I feel necessary, in order to bring about pacification, in order to be able to slow yourself down, let your energy guide you. It's going to use your algorithms anyways. And what will happen when you start to get to that more passive state, and again, I've emphasized this in a couple of the other videos, your consciousness, what you're perceiving reality to be, begins to shift and change a little bit. And as that happens, your sense of self and the solidity of a self that is not so responsive to external variables, therefore not producing the response that feels a need to, in a sense, put on a mask to become an A for this person, or a B for this person, or a C for this person, but to stay solid within the energy field, and the ego's alignment within the energy field allows those masks to naturally come down. So chapter 5, fear trumps love, almost every time, I'm really talking to the biological imperative. I'm talking to just that initial sense of uncomfortableness. Fear is at the root of the human experience. Well, if you really think about your own behavior throughout life, if there's been shame, or there's been self-reproach, I should have done this, I should have done that, then really those are fear-based patterns. We don't necessarily see it as fear, but if you think about it from the perspective of fear, you'll start to see, yeah, a lot of what influences my behavioral response, my own inner dialogue, is fearful. And then the last part of this is it creates the mask we hide behind. Well, they're always going to be there. It's just who's the master of what mask you're going to wear, you know? And I think that's a huge challenge, to be able to look into yourself and find, again, it goes back to solidity. If you're solid within your vision of who it is you are as it pertains to the world that we're living in, the time-space continuum that we're living in right now, then it becomes more natural just to let the mask come down and say, I'm going to do a video and I'm going to summarize it and say, you guys have a good Sunday. This has been fun. Enjoy the rest of your week, or this new week coming at us. Cheers.